The morning fog hung thick between the tall pine trees as Lieutenant Jake Morrison pushed through the dense Oregon forest. His boots crunched on dead leaves and broken branches. 2 days of hiking through this wilderness had left him tired, but he could not give up now. The smoking wreckage was close. Jake stopped and checked his scanner again. The device beeped softly, showing heat signatures ahead. The alien ship had crashed somewhere in this valley, and Command wanted answers. They wanted to know what kind of technology was inside that massive vessel that had fallen from the sky like a burning star. He adjusted his rifle and moved forward carefully. The forest around him felt different somehow. The trees seemed taller, here, their branches reaching up toward the gray sky in strange ways. Some of the smaller plants had grown in odd spiral patterns that Jake had never seen before. He shook his head and kept walking. 2 days alone in the woods could make anyone see things that were not really there. The smell hit him first. It was not the usual smell of burning metal or fuel that he expected from a crash site. Instead, the air carried a sweet scent, like flowers blooming in spring. Mixed with that was something else, something earthy and rich, like fresh soil after rain. Jake frowned and raised his rifle higher. Through a gap between 2 massive oak trees, Jake finally saw it. The alien ship stretched across the forest floor like a sleeping giant. It was huge, much larger than any human spacecraft Jake had ever seen. The hull was not made of smooth metal like Earth ships. Instead, it looked almost organic, with curves and ridges that reminded Jake of tree bark or animal bones. The most surprising thing was the color. Jake had expected silver or gray metal, but this ship was dark brown and green, with patches that seemed to shift and change when he was not looking directly at them. Strange symbols covered parts of the hull, glowing faintly with soft blue and green light. Jake crept closer, his scanner beeping more rapidly now. The device showed no immediate life signs, but the energy readings were off the charts. Whatever powered this ship was still active, even after the crash. Steam rose from several cracks in the hull, and he could see that one section had been torn open, creating a hole large enough for a person to enter. As he approached the breach, Jake noticed something that made him stop in his tracks. The trees, closest to the ship, had changed. Their bark had taken on the same brown-green color as the alien hull. Some of the branches were growing toward the ship instead of up toward the sun, as if the vessel was pulling them closer. "That's impossible," Jake whispered to himself. Plants did not work that way. Trees could not change their growth patterns overnight. He activated his comm unit and tried to contact base. Static filled his earpiece, but he managed to get a signal. Through. "Base, this is Morrison. I found the crash site. The ship is massive, maybe 300 meters long. Hull appears to be some kind of bioorganic material. I'm seeing strange plant growth around the site, requesting permission to investigate inside." The reply came through broken and unclear due to the interference. "Morrison, proceed with caution. Report every minutes." Jake cursed under his breath. The ship seemed to be generating some kind of electromagnetic field that was messing with his equipment. He would have to rely on his training and instincts. He moved to the breach in the hull and peered inside. His helmet lights revealed a corridor that curved away into darkness. The walls were not flat like human ship corridors. Instead, they had a flowing, organic shape that reminded Jake of the inside of a tree trunk. Thin veins of bioluminescent material ran along the walls, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. The air coming from inside the ship carried that same sweet, earthy smell, but stronger now. Jake could also hear something, a low, rhythmic sound that seemed to come from deep within the vessel. It was not mechanical. It sounded more like breathing or the wind moving through leaves. Jake took a deep breath and stepped inside. His boots made soft sounds on the floor, which felt slightly springy under his weight. The corridor was warm, much warmer than the cool forest air outside. As he walked deeper into the ship, the bioluminescent veins grew brighter, providing enough light for him to see without his helmet lights. The walls around him seemed to pulse, gently, and Jake realized that the ship was not just damaged, it was alive in some way. This was not a machine in the way humans understood machines. This was something else entirely, something that blurred the line between technology and biology. After walking for several minutes, Jake came to a large chamber. His jaw dropped at what he saw inside. Dozens of pod-like structures lined the walls, each one about the size of a human body. They were translucent, filled with a soft green liquid that glowed faintly. Inside each pod, Jake could see a figure. The beings inside were humanoid, but clearly not human. They had the basic shape of people, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, but their skin looked like bark, rough and brown with patches of green. Some had what appeared to be small branches or twigs growing from their shoulders and arms. Leaves sprouted from various parts of their bodies, and their hair looked more like moss or lichen than anything human. Most of the pods seemed to be in some kind of sleep or stasis mode, but a few were beginning to glow more brightly. Jake realized that some of these alien beings were waking up. He raised his rifle instinctively, but something made him hesitate. These creatures did not look dangerous. They looked peaceful, almost gentle. One of the pods near the center of the chamber was glowing much brighter than the others, and Jake could see the being inside moving slowly. The pod made a soft hissing sound, and the front section began to open like a flower blooming. Sweet-smelling mist poured out, and Jake found himself breathing it in despite his training telling him to put on his air filter. The mist smelled like a forest after rain, full of life and growth. The being inside sat up slowly, blinking large, dark eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ancient trees. When it looked at Jake, it did not show fear or aggression. Instead, it tilted its head slightly, like a curious animal trying to understand what it was seeing. Jake lowered his rifle slightly. His mission was to assess the threat level and gather intelligence. But these beings did not seem threatening at all. They seemed more like refugees than invaders, survivors of some cosmic disaster rather than conquerors. The awakened being made a soft clicking sound and raised one bark-covered hand in what might have been a greeting. Jake found himself stepping closer, drawn by a strange feeling that this moment would change everything he thought he knew about life in the universe. Jake stood frozen as the bark-skinned being slowly climbed out of its pod. The creature moved with careful, deliberate motions, like an old tree bending in a gentle wind. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, with long limbs that seemed both strong and graceful. Small leaves rustled softly as it moved, making a sound like wind through a forest canopy. The being's large, dark eyes focused on Jake with what seemed like curiosity rather than fear. Its face was more human than Jake had expected, with features that reminded him of carved wood sculptures. When it opened its mouth instead of teeth, Jake saw rows of what looked like small white seeds. "Easy there," Jake said softly, keeping his rifle lowered but ready. "I'm not going to hurt you." The creature tilted its head at the sound of Jake's voice. It made a series of soft clicking noises, almost musical in their pattern. Then it raised one hand and pointed at itself, tapping its chest gently. The clicking sounds changed rhythm, becoming more complex. Jake realized the being was trying to tell him its name. He lowered his rifle completely and tapped his own chest. "Jake," he said clearly. "I'm Jake." The creature's bark-like face seemed to shift in what might have been a smile. It repeated the tapping motion and made a longer series of clicks. Jake could not pronounce the sounds, but he tried to remember the pattern. Around them, other pods were beginning to glow brighter. The soft, hissing sounds filled the chamber as more containers started to open. Jake felt his heart rate increase, but he forced himself to stay calm. If these beings had wanted to hurt him, they could have done it already. The first creature, who Jake decided to call Thornwick because of the thorn-like protrusions on its arms, gestured toward the other awakening beings. It made more clicking sounds, but these seemed different. like it was talking to its companions rather than to Jake. 3 more creatures emerged from their pods, each one unique. One was shorter and covered in what looked like soft moss instead of bark. Another had bright green patches that reminded Jake of new spring leaves. The third was darker, with skin like old oak bark and tiny white flowers growing from its shoulders. All of them looked at Jake with the same curious, non-threatening expression. None of them seemed afraid, which surprised Jake. He was carrying a weapon and wearing military gear, but they treated him like a welcome guest rather than an intruder. Thornwick moved closer to Jake, and he caught a scent like pine needles and fresh earth. The creature reached out slowly, giving Jake time to pull away if he wanted to. When Jake didn't move, Thornwick gently touched his arm. The moment the bark-like skin made contact with Jake's uniform, something amazing happened. Images flashed through Jake's mind, not his own memories, but something else entirely. He saw vast forests under alien stars, trees that grew to impossible heights, and cities built entirely from living wood. He saw space, but not empty space. Instead, he saw gardens floating between the stars, connected by networks of light that looked like root systems. Jake gasped and stepped back. Thornwick withdrew its hand and made what sounded like apologetic clicking noises. The other creatures gathered around, all of them making soft sounds that reminded Jake of wind through leaves. "What was that?" Jake asked, his voice shaky. "How? Did you show me those things?" Thornwick seemed to understand that Jake was confused. It gestured to itself, then to the walls of the ship, then to Jake. The meaning was unclear, but Jake got the impression that the creature was trying to explain some kind of connection. Jake activated his scanner again, trying to get readings on these beings. The device showed they were definitely alive, with what appeared to be plant-based biology mixed with something else the scanner couldn't identify. Their body temperature was lower than human, and instead of a single heartbeat, the scanner detected multiple rhythmic patterns throughout their bodies. More interesting was what the scanner showed about the ship itself. The walls, floor, and ceiling all registered as living tissue. The entire vessel was one massive organism, and these beings were not just passengers, they were part of it, connected to it in ways Jake's human science could barely detect. Thornwick approached Jake again, this time holding something in its hands. It was a small branch with bright green leaves, but as Jake watched, the leaves began to change color, shifting from green to blue to silver and back again. The creature offered the branch to Jake. Jake hesitated. His training told him not to accept anything from an unknown alien species. But these beings had shown no hostility, and he was beginning to understand that this first contact was more important than any military protocol. He reached out and took the branch. The moment his fingers touched it, he felt a warmth spread up his arm. The warmth was pleasant, like sitting by a campfire on a cold night. More images flashed through his mind, but these were different from before. He saw Earth from space, but not as he knew it. This version of Earth was covered in forests that glowed with soft light, connected by streams of energy that flowed between continents. He saw humans living in harmony with plants that could think and feel, cities where buildings grew from the ground instead of being built. Jake understood somehow that this was not Earth's past or present, but a possible future. Thornwick was showing him what could be, not what was. "You're not invaders," Jake said, his voice filled with wonder. "You're gardeners." Thornwick's face shifted again in that almost smile. It nodded, a very human gesture that looked strange, on its tree-like features. Then it gestured toward the other creatures and made more complex clicking sounds. Jake realized that this was not just first contact with an alien species. This was first contact with an entirely different way of thinking about life itself. These beings did not separate themselves from the plants and forests around them. They were part of nature in a way that humans had never been. The branch in his hands grew warmer, and Jake felt his thoughts becoming clearer. He understood that Thornwick and its companions were refugees, but not in the way he had first thought. They were not running from war or disaster. They were searching for new worlds where they could plant the seeds of their living civilization. And somehow, they had chosen Earth. Jake looked around the chamber at the peaceful alien beings watching, him with their ancient, patient eyes. He realized that everything humans thought they knew about space, about life, about their place in the universe, was about to change forever. The branch pulsed gently in his hands, and Jake felt a strange new connection forming, not just with these creatures, but with something much larger and older than he had ever imagined. Jake had been inside the alien ship for 3 hours, but it felt like minutes. Time seemed to move differently here, flowing like honey instead of racing like a river. He sat cross-legged on the soft, springy floor surrounded by Thornwick and the other plant beings. The magical branch still rested in his hands, warm and alive. Every few minutes, Jake tried to contact his base, but the static only grew worse. His radio crackled with broken voices that sounded like they were coming from very far away. He should have been worried about losing contact, but somehow he felt calm. The sweet air inside the ship made everything seem peaceful and right. Thornwick had been showing Jake more images through the branch. Jake saw other worlds where forests covered entire planets, where trees grew tall as mountains and their roots connected every living thing. He saw creatures like Thornwick living in harmony, with plants that could move and think. Most amazing of all, he saw networks of light that connected not just trees on one world, but forests across different planets and star systems. "It's like the internet," Jake said softly, "but made of roots and trees instead of computers and cables." Thornwick tilted its head, not understanding the words but seeming to sense Jake's meaning. The creature gestured to the walls of the ship, then to itself, then pointed upward toward where the forest waited outside. Jake was beginning to understand. This ship was not just a vehicle. It was a piece of living forest that could travel between stars, carrying seeds and knowledge to new worlds. Thornwick and the others were not just passengers. They were part of the ship itself, gardeners who helped forests grow across the galaxy. But something else was happening to Jake. Something he did not fully understand yet. Every time he breathed the sweet air or touched the warm branch, he felt more connected to the forest outside. He could almost hear the trees whispering to each other, sharing secrets through their root networks. Jake stood up and walked to a section of the wall that glowed brighter than the rest. When he placed his hand against it, he felt the heartbeat of the ship, slow and steady like an ancient tree. But he also felt something else, the pulse of the forest outside, calling to him. "I need some fresh air," Jake told Thornwick, though he knew the creature could not understand his words. Thornwick stood and followed as Jake made his way back through the curved corridors toward the breach in the hull. The plant being seemed concerned, making soft clicking sounds and gesturing for Jake to stay, but Jake felt pulled by something he could not name. The forest outside was singing to him, or maybe it was his imagination. He climbed through the breach and stepped back onto the earth. The moment his boots touched the ground, Jake felt a shock of connection. It was like plugging into an electrical outlet, but instead of pain, there was only warmth and belonging. The trees around the crash site seemed to lean toward him, their branches reaching out like welcoming arms. Jake walked to the nearest oak tree and placed his palm against its rough bark. Images flooded his mind. Not the alien visions Thornwick had shown him, but memories from Earth's own forests. He saw this very tree as a young sapling, growing slowly over decades. He felt the rain that had nourished its roots, the sun that had fed its leaves, the small animals that had made homes in its branches. "This is impossible," Jake whispered. But even as he said it, he knew it was real. Hours passed, though Jake lost track of time completely. He moved from tree to tree, learning their stories, feeling their connections to each other through underground root networks he had never known existed. The forest was alive in ways he had never imagined. Not just individual trees, but one vast, thinking organism. His radio crackled to life with a clearer signal. "Morrison, this is Captain Stone. What is your status? You've been radio silent for 6 hours." Jake blinked, surprised. 6 hours? It felt like he had just stepped outside. He looked around and realized the sun was much lower in the sky. Evening was approaching. "Captain Stone," Jake said into his radio, "I'm at the crash site. The aliens are peaceful. They're not invaders. They're something else entirely." "Copy that, Morrison. We're moving to your position now. ETA 20 minutes. Stay. Put and maintain radio contact." "Understood," Jake replied, but as soon as he said it, he felt a strange reluctance to leave the forest. Jake walked back toward the ship, where Thornwick and 2 other plant beings waited at the breach. They had been watching him, and their large, dark eyes showed what looked like concern mixed with understanding. Thornwick approached Jake and held out its hand. Jake took it without hesitation, and immediately felt the shared connection between the alien, the ship, and the forest around them. For a moment, all boundaries disappeared. Jake was simultaneously human, plant being, living ship, and ancient forest. He was individual and collective, separate and connected. In that moment of perfect unity, Jake understood what Thornwick had been trying to show him. These beings did not just live in forests, they were forests, in the same way that humans were made of cells but were more than just collections of cells. The ship was a forest that could travel. The plant beings were the forest's way of thinking and moving, and somehow the Earth's forest was welcoming them home. When the connection faded, Jake found that his skin had changed. His left hand, the one that had been holding the branch and touching trees, was no longer its normal pale color. Instead, it had a faint green tint, and he could swear he saw thin lines running under the skin like tiny roots. Jake should have been afraid, but he felt only wonder. Something was happening to him, something that connected him to both the alien forest consciousness and Earth's own plant networks. He was becoming a bridge between 2 different kinds of life. The sound of helicopter rotors filled the air, growing louder as Captain Stone and her team approached. Jake looked at Thornwick, who seemed to understand that other humans were coming. "They're going to want to study you," Jake said. "They're going to be afraid." Thornwick made soft clicking sounds and touched Jake's changed hand. More images flowed between them, not of distant worlds this time, but of Earth itself. Jake saw his home planet as the plant beings saw it, a young forest world just beginning to wake up, ready to join the greater network of consciousness that connected thinking forests across the galaxy. But he also saw the fear and misunderstanding that would come when other humans learned about this first contact. Not everyone would be ready to accept that trees could think, that forests could travel between stars, or that humanity might need to change in order to join the galactic community. The helicopters were very close now. Jake could see their lights through the trees. Captain Stone would arrive soon with questions Jake was not sure he could answer, at least not in ways that would make sense to minds that had never touched the forest consciousness. Jake looked down at his changing hand and felt the forest singing in his blood. Whatever happened next, he knew there was no going back to the way things were before. The connection had been made, and Earth itself would never be the same. Captain Rebecca Stone dropped from her helicopter rope 20 feet from the alien crash site. Her tactical team followed quickly behind her, weapons ready and scanners active. She had been worried about Jake ever since his radio went silent, and seeing the massive organic ship only increased her concern. "Morrison, report," Rebecca called into her radio as she approached the breach in the alien hull. "I'm here, Captain." Jake's voice came back, but something in his tone made Rebecca pause. He sounded different, calmer than she had ever heard him. "The situation is under control. The aliens are peaceful." Rebecca found Jake sitting inside the ship with four of the strangest beings she had ever seen. They looked like people made of trees and moss, with leaves growing from their skin and eyes like dark pools of forest shadow. What shocked her most was that Jake seemed completely comfortable with them. "Morrison, step away from the aliens," Rebecca ordered, raising her rifle. "Captain, they're not dangerous," Jake said, standing slowly. "They're refugees. They're trying to find new homes for their forests." Rebecca noticed immediately that something was wrong with Jake. His left hand had a green tint to it, and there were thin, dark lines running under his skin like plant roots. When he moved, she could swear she heard a soft rustling sound, like wind through leaves. "What happened to your hand, Morrison?" Rebecca demanded. Jake looked down at his changed hand and smiled. "I made contact, Captain. Real contact. These beings, they call themselves the Verdani. They don't just live in forests. They are forests. Their entire civilization is based on the connection between all plant life." Dr. Michael Roberts, the team's science officer, pushed forward with his scanner running at full power. His readings made his eyes go wide. "Captain, this ship is not a machine at all. It's a living organism, like a tree or plant, but incredibly complex. And these beings, they're not just plant-based life forms. They're connected to the ship at a cellular level." One of the Verdani, the tall one Jake had named Thornwick, approached Rebecca slowly. It made soft clicking sounds and held out its hand, palm up, in what looked like a gesture of peace. "Don't touch it," Rebecca warned, but Jake stepped between them. "Captain, they communicate through touch. They share memories and knowledge through some kind of biological network. What I learned in just a few hours could change everything we know about life in the universe." Rebecca studied Jake's face. He looked healthy and alert, but there was something different about his eyes. They seemed deeper somehow, like he was seeing things she could not see. "Morrison, you've been exposed to unknown alien biology. We need to get you to the medical bay for testing." "I'm fine, Captain. Better than fine, actually. I can feel things I never felt before. The forest around us, it's alive in ways we never understood. Every tree is connected to every other tree through root networks. They share nutrients, information, even consciousness." Dr. Roberts was still scanning the area with his equipment. "Captain, this is incredible. The alien ship is not just connected to these beings. It's connected to our forest, too. Look at these readings. The local plant life is showing increased electrical activity and cellular changes. Whatever these aliens are doing, it's affecting the entire ecosystem." Rebecca felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of changes?" "The trees closest to the ship are showing signs of enhanced neural activity. It's like they're becoming more aware, more intelligent, and the effect is spreading outward through the root networks." Jake nodded eagerly. "That's exactly what I'm trying to tell you. The Verdani travel from world to world, finding compatible forests and helping them connect to a galactic network. Earth's forests are already connected to each other. We just never knew it. The Verdani can help us join something much bigger. Or they could be taking over our planet," Rebecca said grimly. Thornwick seemed to sense the tension in the air. It made more clicking sounds and gestured toward Jake. Through their shared connection, Jake could understand what the Verdani was trying to communicate. Thornwick says they've been searching for centuries to find a world where humans and forests could work together. They've watched Earth from space, waiting for us to be ready. The crash was not an accident. They came here on purpose." Dr. Roberts looked up from his scanner. "Morrison might be right, Captain. These readings suggest that the integration between their ship and our forest is creating something new, something that combines alien technology with Earth biology. If this is some kind of invasion, it's the strangest one I've ever seen." Rebecca activated her radio to call base. "Command, this is Stone. We have a situation at the crash site. The aliens appear to be causing biological changes to the local ecosystem. Request immediate backup and containment protocols." The radio crackled with static for several seconds before a voice came through. "Copy, Stone. General Williams is en route with a full containment team. ETA, 2 hours. Do not let the situation spread beyond your current location." Jake's face went pale. "Captain, you don't understand. General Williams will want to destroy the ship and kill the Verdani. But if we do that, we'll lose the greatest opportunity in human history." "What opportunity?" Rebecca asked. Jake gestured toward Thornwick and the other Verdani. "The chance to join a peaceful alliance of worlds. These beings have knowledge that spans thousands of years and hundreds of planets. They can teach us how to live in harmony with nature instead of destroying it. They can show us how to travel between stars using living ships that don't pollute or destroy. At what cost, Morrison? Look at your hand. Look at what's happening to you." Jake held up his changing hand and smiled. "This is not damage, Captain. This is evolution. I can feel the connection to every plant in this forest. I can sense the health of the trees, the flow of nutrients through the soil, the conversations that happen through root networks. I'm becoming part of something bigger than myself." Dr. Roberts stepped closer to Jake with his scanner. "His vital signs are actually improving, Captain. Heart rate is steady, blood pressure perfect, brain activity increased. Whatever is happening, to him, it's not harming him." Rebecca looked around at her team. Some of the soldiers were starting to lower their weapons. The peaceful nature of the Verdani was obvious, and the beauty of the ship and its organic technology was impressive even to military minds. "Morrison, if what you're saying is true, then humanity has to make a choice. Do we join this galactic forest network, or do we remain isolated?" Jake nodded. "That's exactly right, Captain. But it's not just about humanity anymore. The connection has already begun. Earth's forests are waking up and joining the network whether we want them to or not. The question is whether humans will be part of that awakening or left behind." Thornwick approached Rebecca again, moving slowly and keeping its hands visible. This time, Rebecca did not raise her weapon. The Verdani held out a small branch covered in leaves that shimmered with soft light. "It's offering to show you what it showed me," Jake explained. "You can see their worlds, their knowledge, their hopes for Earth. But, Captain, once you make that connection, you can't go back to seeing the world the way you did before." Rebecca stared at the glowing branch. In 2 hours, General Williams would arrive with orders to destroy everything at this site. She had to decide whether to trust Jake's incredible story or follow military protocol. The branch pulsed gently in Thornwick's hand, waiting for her answer. General Patricia Williams landed with enough firepower to level a small city. 3 helicopters full of soldiers surrounded the crash site, while a 4th carried equipment that Rebecca did not recognize but looked very dangerous. The general herself strode through the forest like she owned it, her steel-gray hair pulled back and her jaw set in a hard line. "Captain Stone, report," General Williams demanded as she approached the alien ship. Rebecca had spent the last 2 hours thinking about her decision. She had not touched Thornwick's glowing branch, but she had watched 3 of her soldiers accept the connection. They now showed the same green tints on their hands that Jake displayed, and they all spoke with wonder about the forest consciousness they could now feel. "General, the situation is complex," Rebecca began. "The aliens call themselves Verdani. They appear to be a peaceful species that forms symbiotic relationships with forest ecosystems. They're not invaders in any traditional sense." General Williams looked at Jake, who stood calmly beside Thornwick and the other plant beings. The general's eyes narrowed as she noticed his changed appearance. "Lieutenant Morrison, you've been compromised by alien influence. Step away from those creatures immediately." "With respect, General, I haven't been compromised," Jake replied. "I've been enhanced. I can now communicate with plant life in ways that could revolutionize agriculture, forestry, and our understanding of ecosystems. You've been infected with alien biology, soldier. Dr. Chen, Prepare the containment units. Dr. Michael Chen stepped forward with a team of scientists carrying strange metal boxes that hummed with energy. Rebecca noticed that the Verdani became agitated when they saw the equipment, making urgent clicking sounds to each other. "General, I don't think containment is the right approach," Rebecca said. "These beings have offered to share their knowledge with us. They want to help Earth's forests join a galactic network of connected worlds. Captain Stone, your job is to follow orders, not negotiate with alien species," General Williams snapped. "These creatures have infected our personnel with unknown biological agents. They represent a clear threat to human independence." Jake stepped forward, and Rebecca could see that the green changes in his skin had spread up his arm. Small leaf buds were now visible along his forearms, but he looked healthier than she had ever seen him. "General, you're wrong about the threat," Jake said. "The real threat is refusing this opportunity. The Verdani have traveled across the galaxy finding worlds where intelligent life can form partnerships with living ecosystems. They're offering us the chance to solve climate change, to travel between stars using living ships that regenerate instead of consuming resources, at the cost of human independence and biological integrity," General Williams replied. "Look at yourself, Morrison. You're becoming something that's not human." "I'm becoming something more than human," Jake corrected. "I can feel the health of every tree in this forest. I know when plants need water or nutrients. I can sense the underground networks that connect all plant life on Earth. This is not loss. This is evolution." Thornwick approached the general slowly, holding out the same glowing branch it had offered Rebecca. General Williams immediately raised her sidearm. "Stay back, creature." Jake translated the clicking sounds Thornwick was making. "It's offering to show you what they've shown me. Images of worlds where technology and nature work together instead of fighting each other. Civilizations that have lasted thousands of years because they learned to live in harmony with their planets instead of exploiting them." "I've seen enough," General Williams said. "Dr. Chen, activate the containment field." Dr. Chen hesitated. "General, perhaps we should study the symbiotic process before we disrupt it. The potential benefits could be enormous. The potential risks are greater. Activate the field." Dr. Chen reluctantly activated his equipment. A shimmering energy barrier appeared around the Verdani, separating them from the humans. The moment the field activated, the plant beings cried out in obvious distress, and the connected humans, Jake and the 3 soldiers, doubled over in pain. "You're hurting them," Rebecca said, moving toward Jake. "Stand down, Captain," General Williams ordered. "Chen, prepare for transport. We're taking the aliens to the research facility." "General, no!" Jake gasped through the pain caused by his severed connection. "If you take them away from the forest, they'll die. They need the connection to survive. That's not our concern. Our concern is protecting humanity from alien influence." But as Dr. Chen tried to move his equipment closer to the Verdani, something unexpected happened. The trees around the crash site began to move, not in the wind but deliberately, their branches reaching down toward the containment field. The ground itself started to shift as root networks beneath the soil activated. "What the hell is happening?" General Williams demanded. Rebecca understood before anyone else did. "The forest is protecting them. The connection isn't just between the Verdani and the humans who touched them. It's between the Verdani and every plant in this forest." Vines erupted from the ground, wrapping around the containment equipment. Trees dropped branches to block the soldiers' weapons. The earth itself seemed to rise up in defense of the peaceful. "Aliens! Fall back!" General Williams ordered, but her soldiers were having trouble moving through the suddenly hostile forest. Jake, despite his pain, managed to stand and approach the containment field. "General, please, the forest is only defending itself because it sees the Verdani as part of itself now. If you try to hurt them, you're declaring war on Earth's entire ecosystem." "That's impossible," General Williams said, but she was looking nervously at the trees that were now clearly moving with purpose. "Is it?" Rebecca asked. We know that trees communicate through root networks. We know they share nutrients and information. What if they've always been more connected than we realized, and the Verdani are just helping us see it? Dr. Chen was staring at his readings in amazement. General, the biological activity in this forest has increased by 300%. Every plant within a 5-mile radius is showing enhanced neural activity. It's like the entire ecosystem is becoming more intelligent. Jake pressed his hand against the containment field, and immediately the forest around them calmed. The trees stopped their threatening movements, and the vines retreated into the ground. I can communicate with them, Jake explained. I can ask the forest to be patient while we work this out. But General, you have to understand, this is not an invasion. This is an invitation to join something bigger than any of us imagined. General. Williams looked around at the quiet forest, then at her soldiers who were clearly outmatched by an ecosystem that could think and act as one unit. What exactly are you proposing, Morrison? Jake looked at Thornwick through the containment field. Even separated, he could still sense the aliens' peaceful intentions. The Verdani want to establish a small symbiotic zone here in this forest. Humans who choose to connect with the network can learn from it and help Earth join the galactic community. Those who don't want to connect can live their lives normally, just knowing that Earth is part of something larger. And if we refuse, then the Verdani will die, their ship will become just another dead tree in the forest, and humanity will remain alone in a universe full of connected worlds that will never be able to join. General Williams was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she looked at Dr. Chen. How many of our people have been affected? 4 so far, including Lieutenant Morrison, all showing improved health and enhanced sensory capabilities. No negative effects that I can detect. Rebecca stepped forward. General, I request permission to make the connection myself. If this is as beneficial as Morrison claims, then we need to understand it fully before making any decisions. General. Williams stared at Rebecca for several seconds. Around them, the forest waited in perfect silence, as if every tree was holding its breath. Stand down the containment field, the general finally ordered, but maintain a security perimeter. If this goes wrong, Captain Stone, it's on your head. Rebecca nodded and walked toward Thornwick as the energy barrier flickered and disappeared. The Verdani held out the glowing branch once again, and this time Rebecca took it without hesitation. The connection was immediate and overwhelming, but also beautiful beyond words. Rebecca suddenly understood what Jake had been trying to explain. This was not loss of humanity, but expansion of it into something greater and more wonderful than she had ever dreamed possible. 6 months after first contact, the Oregon forest had become the most important place on Earth. The small clearing where the Verdani ship had crashed was now the center of a thriving symbiotic zone that stretched for 50 miles in every direction. Trees grew taller and healthier than ever before, their leaves shimmering with the faint bioluminescence that marked their connection to the galactic forest network. Jake Morrison stood at the edge of what people now called the Connection Grove, watching the latest group of volunteers prepare for their transformation. He looked very different from the soldier who had first entered the alien ship. His skin had taken on a bark-like texture in places, and small branches with bright green. Leaves grew from his shoulders, but his eyes were still human, still filled with the curiosity and courage that had made first contact possible. "Are you ready for this?" Jake asked the young woman standing beside him. Her name was Lisa Chen, Dr. Michael Chen's daughter, and she had traveled from California to become part of Earth's first interplanetary consciousness. "I've been ready my whole life," Lisa replied. "I just never knew what I was ready for until now." Jake smiled and led her to the center of the grove, where Thornwick waited with several other Verdani. The plant beings had grown more tree-like. Over the months, their roots extending deep into the earth and their branches reaching toward the sky. But they were still clearly intelligent, still capable of communication and emotion. The integration process was gentler now than it had been in those first chaotic days. Humans who chose to connect with the network did so gradually over the course of several weeks, allowing their bodies and minds to adjust slowly to the new sensations and capabilities. Captain Rebecca Stone, now director of the Symbiotic Zone, approached the group with a clipboard full of forms and medical readings. She had been one of the first to fully integrate, and the changes in her were remarkable. She could communicate with the forest directly, sensing the health and needs of every plant within miles. Her military training had proven invaluable in organizing the zone and managing the thousands of visitors who came seeking connection. "How are our new arrivals adapting?" Rebecca asked Jake. "Better than expected. The network is getting stronger as more people join. The forest consciousness is learning human language and culture, while our volunteers are learning to think in terms of ecosystem balance and long-term sustainability." Rebecca nodded and made notes on her clipboard. The early days had been difficult, with the military wanting to quarantine the entire area and the government unsure how to handle humanity's first encounter with alien intelligence. But as the benefits of the symbiosis became clear, opposition had faded. The connected humans showed remarkable improvements in health and mental clarity. They could sense environmental problems before they became serious, communicate with plant life to optimize crop growth, and access a network of knowledge that spanned thousands of worlds. Most importantly, they had gained a perspective on life that valued long-term harmony over short-term gain. Dr. Michael Chen approached the group, his scanner beeping softly as it recorded the biological changes in the new volunteers. He had initially been skeptical of his daughter's decision to join the network, but watching her thrive and grow in ways that were both human and more than human had changed his mind. "The integration rates are improving," he reported. "The network is learning to work with human biology more efficiently. What took weeks for the first volunteers now takes only days." Jake looked up at the sky, where he could see the shapes of 3 more Verdani ships approaching through the clouds. Over the past 6 months, dozens of ships had arrived, each one carrying refugees from dying worlds and seeds from forests across the galaxy. Earth was becoming a hub world, a place where different forms of plant-based consciousness could meet and share knowledge. "The Galactic Council has approved our application," Rebecca announced, reading from a message that had arrived through the forest network. "Earth is officially recognized as a member world of the Connected Forest Alliance." A cheer went up from the humans gathered in the grove, and the Verdani made their own sounds of celebration, clicking and rustling like wind through happy leaves. Jake felt a surge of pride and wonder through his connection to the network. In less than a year, humanity had gone from being alone in the universe to being part of a community that spanned galaxies. But the changes were not limited to the symbiotic zone. Around the world, forests were showing signs of enhanced consciousness and connectivity. Trees in the Amazon were communicating with forests in Canada. Root networks in Africa were sharing nutrients with struggling ecosystems in Australia. The planet itself was becoming more alive, more aware, more connected. Not all humans chose to join the network. Many preferred to remain fully human, and that choice was respected. The connected humans served as bridges between the two worlds, translating the needs and concerns of both sides. Some cities had established small symbiotic groves where people could experience the connection temporarily without permanent change. Jake watched as Lisa Chen placed her hand on one of Thornwick's extended branches and gasped as the first images from the galactic network flowed into her mind. He remembered his own first connection, the wonder and terror of touching minds that were ancient when Earth was young. "What do you see?" Jake asked her gently. "Everything," Lisa whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I see forests on worlds, where the trees sing with voices like crystal bells. I see cities grown from living wood that repairs itself and grows more beautiful with age. I see spaceships that are entire ecosystems, carrying gardens between the stars. And now Earth is part of all that," Jake said. Our forests will share their knowledge with worlds we've never dreamed of. Our ideas about technology and exploration will spread through the network to help other species solve problems they never thought possible. Rebecca approached with a new arrival, a young man who claimed to be a botanist, but whom Jake suspected was actually a government observer. There were still those in positions of power who worried about the changes happening to Earth, who feared that humanity was losing its identity by joining the galactic community. Jake could understand their concerns, but he also knew they were wrong. Humanity was not disappearing. It was growing, evolving, becoming something greater than it had ever been before. The connected humans were still human in all the ways that mattered. They still loved, still dreamed, still reached for the stars. They had simply learned to do all of those things in harmony with the living world around them. As the sun set over the connection grove, Jake felt the daily pulse of communication that traveled through the network to connected worlds across the galaxy. Earth was sharing the story of its day, the new volunteers who had joined, the seeds that had been planted, the knowledge that had been gained. In return, other worlds shared their own stories, their own discoveries, their own dreams for the future. Standing there in the grove, surrounded by beings that were both human and plant, both earthly and cosmic, Jake realized that this was what he had been searching for his whole life without knowing it. Not just contact with alien intelligence, but connection with intelligence that permeated the universe itself. The forest around him rustled gently in the evening breeze, and Jake heard in that sound the voices of a million worlds, all connected. By roots that ran deeper than space, by consciousness that grew stronger with every connection made. Earth was no longer alone, and neither was humanity. They were part of something vast and beautiful and eternal, growing together toward a future that would be written by every leaf on every tree, on every world where life had learned to think and dream and reach for the stars. The inked fighter had indeed breached the vessel, but what had seized his thoughts was not conquest or destruction. It was the simple, profound realization that life was meant to be shared, to be connected, to grow together in harmony across the infinite garden of the universe.